Okay, hello and welcome to the Slam Jam Wrestling Show reaction show. This is a brand new show and this is a very exciting moment to be able to bring this to you. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Survivor Series, Wargames. Yes, the 2022 Survivor Series has just happened and I'm going to be reacting to some of the things on it. But this is also the first of a new era in what is the Slam Jam Wrestling Show. So if you're watching this, then you'll be seeing it exclusively at the moment on the Slam Jam Wrestling Show channels, social media channels, YouTube channel / Slam Jam Wrestling. Because now YouTube have got this weird new system where they say / for whatever the username is. It'll be on Slam Jam Wrestling on Facebook and Slam Jam Wrestling Show on Twitter. So check out the Slam Jam Wrestling Show on any of the platforms and let's get into it. This is a little bit of a test broadcast, so I'm going to leave this on the channel just so that we can see what the show develops into later on. But for now, let's talk about Survivor Series. Survivor Series 2022, there wasn't a ton of matches, but it's because for the first time ever, Triple H finally got his dream of taking Wargames from NXT and bringing it onto the main WWE stage. And it's a pay-per-view where it makes sense to do it, but at the same time, I've got mixed feelings just because having the 5-on-5 matches at the Survivor Series being a Wargames match means that this was a Survivor Series where we didn't get any of the traditional elimination matches. And I can see that in the future they'll probably keep Survivor Series like this, but maybe they'll sneak in a traditional Survivor Series elimination match at some point in future years. If people say, hey, we like Wargames, but give us the 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 elimination matches as well. Now, on the show, there was only 5 matches, and that's because we had the 2 Wargames ones. The women's Wargame match started off the show, and I've got my details here just to refresh my memory from the Wikipedia thing. And it says that the Wargames women's match was the longest match on the show, only by literally 1 minute and 10 seconds. But that's an interesting thing, 39 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, just because of the nature of the Wargames matches, that's for the first 5 minutes, 2 wrestlers are in the ring. Then I think every 3 minutes thereafter, another wrestler from each team comes in one at a time. It means that the match before it can actually properly get going in terms of you can win the match, you have to wait until everyone from both teams is an active part of the match. And so we had Team Belair, which was Bianca Belair, Alexa Bliss, Asuka, Mia Yim, and Becky Lynch, who would be victorious over Team Bayley. And that's Damage Control, Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky. I keep going to say her old name. Nikki Cross and Rhea Ripley, obviously from the Judgment Day. And it was a really good match. They had lots of fun ideas in it. It's great how one of the things recently, obviously, we've had the healing of the character of Nikki Cross to get her from the superhero, almost a superhero, which was just a terrible gimmick, terrible costume. Everything about it didn't really work. Back into being, the kind of more serious character that Nikki Cross has now become. Before the match started, she was climbing on top of the cage that Rhea Ripley was already in. And clearly, one of the things which I found really fascinating about this pay-per-view is just the little rivalries or one-upmanship you saw between the different wrestlers. And so with Nikki Cross climbing on top of the containment cage, you then saw that Rhea Ripley was just grabbing it to do the pull-ups. So she had something to do. She wasn't just going to stand there whilst Nikki came in and was just climbing on the cage. It was great that Nikki Cross later went under the cage, brought in the kendo stick and bringing weapons into it. We had some crazy bumps and stuff in there. I thought it was a really good women's Wargame match. Obviously, we've had them previously in NXT, having not just the women's Wargame match, but the Wargame match, and just having some of the wrestlers here who perhaps hadn't been in a Wargames match in the past. I can't fully remember off the top of my head when they first introduced them, but it may have been the first time for Becky or like Alexa Bliss. I can't remember that if they were in the Wargames matches of yesteryear. And with Team Belair winning, I feel like it was a little bit telling of who was going to win the main event, because if you've got the heel faction and the face faction, if you have the face faction win one, then you might have the heel one win the later one, which is what happened. We'll get to that match momentarily. But also on the show, unfortunately, Finn Balor and AJ Styles didn't really deliver. Like, something kind of went wrong in the chemistry there. It wasn't a bad match. I've seen lots of people really rag on it. I thought it was all right. It's just, I think that people expected perhaps something a bit more special. Obviously, AJ Styles, Finn Balor, both known for their athletic style, high flying style, both former leaders of the Bullet Club. So there's lots of stuff going into this, and yeah, it didn't quite deliver perhaps all that we were hoping for. But speaking of things that didn't deliver all that we were hoping for, the shortest match on the show, Ronda Rousey defeated Shotzi, and that was 7 minutes 15. Now, there's a few botches that are floating around here, like one in particular where I believe Shotzi is trying to get Ronda into a like a DDT onto the ring apron, and Ronda just protects herself too much, too blatantly, and just doesn't want to take the landing on her head and puts her arm down. It's a little bit embarrassing. Obviously, Ronda Rousey is a big star, but it feels like in this second run of hers in the company, not counting her one-off WrestleMania match with her and Kurt Angle against Triple H and Stephanie, her first year in the business, people were super impressed. People were super impressed by that debut as well. But the tide sort of turned against her towards the end of that run. And then since she's come back, people were pleased to see her, but things haven't been very comfortable with her since. It doesn't feel that she's made the progress in the ring. It feels like her attitude, she takes stuff from the fans a bit too personally. And then if she's not delivering the matches, then at some point her stock is going to fall. Now, if she was to leave WWE, I think her stock would rise again, but there's going to reach the point, I think, fairly soon where she'll just feel a bit stale, where people just don't want to see her. But hey, maybe I'm wrong about that. We then had a fairly good match. It was a very good match, I'll say. Not fairly good match. That would be unfair. Seth freaking Rollins, who was the United States champion, losing here, not against Bobby Lashley, but against Austin Theory. And this match kind of delivered everything you would expect from these three. We had Austin Theory doing some impressive stuff, as he always does. He's a very solid wrestler. We had Seth Rollins pulling all kinds of things out the bag, lots of innovation. And, of course, we had Lashley. One great moment was him trying to put both Seth and Austin into the Hurt Lock. And it looked cool, but it also kind of looked like, I forget who was at the front. I think if Seth was at the front, maybe I've got this back to front. But if Seth was at the front, then his arms are being pulled back. And then Austin Theory is just kind of like this in between. And it's like, is that really hurting you? Because at best, you're just being pressed into Bobby Lashley by Seth Rollins at the front. So it's just like you're being squeezed between two people. But he certainly wasn't having those shoulder blades being pulled out or pressure on the neck. So it looked impressive, but it also kind of looked a little bit shoddy. We saw Seth Rollins go for a curb stomp, launching off of the back of Lashley, I believe. No, launching off the back of Austin Theory to give the curb stomp to Lashley. That was an innovative idea. And, of course, this ended with Austin Theory kind of stealing it at the end. So Seth had basically got the win, but Austin Theory was there to pick up the pieces and walked out as the champion. This is good just because the Austin Theory character has had to go through that uncomfortable period of change since Vince McMahon stepping down as CEO and being completely ousted from the company. His run as Money in the Bank contract holder obviously didn't go very well, and it was probably just because they decided that they needed to make some changes. Triple H came in as the new person running things and didn't see Austin in the same way that obviously Vince McMahon did. So gave him a pretty rough time to get the briefcase off of him, but now they're rehabilitating him with a more edgy character, a bit more fire and stuff, and he's come back now to be US champion. So we'll see where he goes from there. Fifth and final match on the show was the men's war game match, and it was the Bloodline against the Brawling Brutes. Now, it's just interesting because the Bloodline seems such a solid team and such like a formidable team. Having the Brawling Brutes now, well, the team Brawling Brutes, then having like Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens, it's like Sheamus obviously has had his ups and downs, and he's been on perhaps a little bit of a rise over the last few months. Had the fantastic match at SummerSlam, but has mostly, I'd say, been sort of floating, sort of hovering. Drew McIntyre obviously is a big deal, but again has been kind of hovering since SummerSlam. Kevin Owens has his ups and downs as well. It just didn't seem that the Brawling Brutes, Ridge and then Butch, they're like the underlings, but even the Usos nowadays, they kind of fit underling, but they seem so much higher than like Ridge Holland. So I was quite pleased for Pete Dunne to start this. Obviously, he's been in the NXT War Games matches before, and it was like a good showcase of him, because if he'd come in later, I just don't think he would have meant anything. And then Ridge coming in, and then, was it Jey Uso? I forget who came in first. And then obviously the drama of that Sami Zayn was then sent in next. Roman from the cage, just sort of sitting there, like, again, just showing how good he is in this heel persona, just delivering orders, very slow, very not slow, but calculated is the word I'd say. And that was great to see. And by the time they all got in there, the real story was about Sami Zayn, and is he going to be friends with Kevin Owens? What's his relationship like? Where's his loyalty for the Bloodline? And obviously it came out throughout the match, not just right at the end, but 2 or 3 times, that he's not just an honorary Uso, he is like a legit Uso now. And so seeing the coming together, the big hug at the end there for Sami, and him being fully accepted into the Bloodline was great. And just the dynamic between the Bloodline, it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here, but you still have to believe that they're going to be angling for Sami to have that face turn. And I just don't think they need to rush it. They don't need to rush it. If this lasted another year or another 2 years, it's like, well, if he fits into this role, his whole role in the Bloodline shouldn't just be defined by people waiting for him to have a face turn, or waiting for him to attack Roman, or to help his friend Kevin Owens or something like this. It could just be that they do good stuff with him, and we're going to see what the dynamic now that there isn't any fallings out within the Bloodline. But it was a really good match. The interesting thing I thought throughout it was that it just seemed to me that between Sheamus, Drew, and Kevin Owens, they were each working their socks off to get that stage time really with Roman, just to justify why they should be the one that gets the main event, the one that gets the world title shot, and perhaps even to be, well, if they really work their socks off, to be the one that should be the person that dethrones Roman. Now, obviously, they probably got a better idea of who will or who won't dethrone Roman going forward in the future, whether that's at WrestleMania or in another year's time, because who would have thought, if you go back in time to the start of this year, that it would definitely be the case that Roman would have both belts, and it would definitely be the WWE World Heavyweight Championship and Universal Championship, and that also that Roman would basically be champion for 2 years plus. And it's like, well, if you're going to do it for 2 years, why not have it for 3 years? Why not have it for 5 years? If they really wanted to, I'm sure they could find a way of making this work, that he is absolutely unstoppable. Give someone that Bruno Sammartino run, give someone that like Bob Backlund length run, or even though Andre the Giant was only champion for a minute, just because he then sold the championship to Ted DiBiase, maybe it's the case of you give him that aura of Andre the Giant, that he's truly undefeatable. And if they're going to do it with anyone, Roman seems to be the one that they could do it with. A 2-year run, it could be a 3-year run. I don't think we need to rush into things like splitting up him with Sammy from the rest of the bloodline, and either having Jay take it from him, or Sammy, or Kevin, or Drew McIntyre. Obviously, it would have made sense back in Cardiff in the UK, but it wasn't time. Like, that was the right moment for Drew, but it wasn't the right moment overall for everything that they'd put into Roman and the bloodline. If they can find a way to separate the world and universal titles, they need to find some clause or something to do that. He's had the universal championship. There's a bit of like something floating in front of me there. It looked like I was something trying to catch like a cat pouring at flies. But him having, he's had the universal title for the whole time. He's had the world championship since earlier this year. If they can find a way to take the WWE championship from him, where there's some clause in the match where, oh, the Money in the Bank winner gets a world title shot, and it's not like you can't take both, or you said you wanted the WWE championship, so it was in there, and you don't get the universal championship, and he keeps on to it. I just think they need to do something like that so that they can separate the world titles and not just have to create a new one. Like, now we're going to have the Galaxy Championship, like Daniel Bryan would always joke about. Just do something to make it make sense so you can have 2 world championships again. And that's weird to say that, because I kind of have never liked the idea of 2 world championships. I always feel like there should be 1 world champion. But if they're going to do it so that they can keep a world championship on Roman for 3 years, 4 years, or something like this, I just feel like that's something that everyone, once it's said and done, would be like, wow, that happened. And it's something that literally just needs time to ever be able to recreate. So you can't just say, oh, well, we'll do a 4-year reign with someone else in the future. It's like, well, who? There are no obvious candidates. And if you're going to do a 4-year long reign with someone, you need to invest 4 years of time. With Roman, we're already over 2 years, and it's like, let's just see how long we can keep going on this. This is one where I feel like you don't have to think we'll get out of there early. You can think, right, we'll leave this until it's a tiny bit stale and see if you can freshen it up again with something. And then if it goes slightly stale again, see how you can freshen it up again. And really, as long as like the ratings hold where they are, or business is still going great, just leave it on Roman. So anyway, these are my thoughts, and this is my Slam Jam Wrestling Show reaction. And I said reaction like that, so it was like as if that's the name of this show or what have you. This is all very experimental, but I thought I'd give these thoughts on Survivor Series 2022 Wargames. And look, it's going to really help me out a lot if you would smash that subscribe button on youtube.com/@SlamJam Wrestling Show. So do check that out. We're also on Facebook at Slam Jam Wrestling Show, and on Twitter and on Instagram. We're on everything, basically. TikTok, do check out Slam Jam Wrestling or Slam Jam Wrestling Show. You'll know because you'll see my face, and you'll see all of like this logo and stuff like that. So make sure, if it's not that, then it's not me. But make sure you go and subscribe to that. There's going to be lots more of these reports, and it's going to be a brand new era to the Slam Jam Wrestling Show, which up to this point, the logo is kind of covered under this experimentation with all of this overlay here. But as you can see, somewhere down there, it says Extreme Improv. Traditionally, it's been on the Extreme Improv channel, but there's now going to be exclusive stuff on just the Slam Jam channels. So I hope you click like and follow and subscribe and all that stuff, just so you can see all the latest content. And with that, from me, from everyone else, stay safe, stay slamming and jamming, always stay extremed, and ciao for now.